Hello, everybody. We will start in about 1 minute. Glad you're here. Kathy, I see you in the lineup, so we'll be starting with you after I have a little bit of an introduction.
Thank you.
Okay, it's 2 o'clock. Let's get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome to my story studio. This is just an informal chat where we're going to talk story, and I'm doing it in the context of hearing about moments when you were brave and then building a story out of it. How do we put a story together? Some of you may already know me in terms of my story makeovers. And that's where people come and they already have a story, and then I make it over or give feedback. This is kind of different because I wanted to just see how we step back even further from that and go to the moment itself and how I might build it out into a story. A couple of things I want to say first is that I'm thinking about story in terms of it serving a purpose, of using it in a presentation or a speech or in business or in your community or somewhere that I'm assuming the intent of your story is to do something with this, to better the life of someone else, not per se a story that might be used in theater or in fiction, though you could even say that those stories should have a point and a lesson to them as well. But we're really kind of going down that lane of, okay, how are we going to use this story for a specific purpose? We're going to go for about an hour, not too much longer than that. And we'll do as many volunteers as we have time for or as want to volunteer. And if you don't want to volunteer, you don't have to. And we'll just fill that up with Q&A. The goal is to talk about story, learn about story, but also for me to record this and get clips of me in action because my social media people say I need to do more. And I'm streaming it into YouTube for my YouTube people. Anyway, with our volunteers, my goal is to try to do what we're doing in about 10 to 15 minutes a person so that somebody else has a turn. Maybe I'm hoping that it could take 3 to 4 minutes for you to tell me about what happened or your moment or the story. And then what I would love to do is almost act like I'm interviewing you and pull out, and I have kind of some questions that I ask in terms of getting to the nuggets of what the story are and how we can use that. What else did I want to tell you? And then once I kind of pull it out, I'll start to kind of talk about how we could put it together and how you may want to use that story in your own business or in your own life. You will see me talk a lot about what's the lesson, what are we using it for. I spend as much time thinking about that with a story than I do writing it. Because I think that is critical. And oftentimes we write a story and we don't really know where it's supposed to go. And so it never really gets there, or at least that's been my experience for years. Okay. So when it's your turn to volunteer, I will simply, now, Kathy, we got coming up first. She's a pro. She's probably already ready to jump in, but you might not even come to this from a speaker background or I don't know, we might get people from all walks of life who are just sharing brave moments. So the first thing I'm going to probably ask is, hey, what happened? Because a story starts with something happened. You might say it might be several somethings. It might be it was a divorce that led to a loss of a job, that led to whatever. There may be several things that happened, but stories are about, and this is what I want to go into really quickly before Kathy, we bring you up, is what is a story? Because sometimes there can be confusion around that, the difference in a story and an anecdote, or a story and an example. A story is about a person or persons, a character, a main character, a person. A thing isn't the main character. It's a person who went through something. Something happened. It was an event. It was a moment. It could have happened over time. But in the story, there was some sort of a conflict or a problem, or maybe there was a desire. I wanted to write a book. I wanted to get this job, or the conflict. I was with an abusive husband, whatever that may be. There's a place of the story where there's a problem here, And so there's a before and an after. And how you got out of the problem, or how you reached that desire, and what you learned in the process. If you've watched my work, you're going to see that some of my stories don't really have that hero's journey element, that character who went through something. Um, Sometimes I'm the character looking in and learning something from what I've just seen. So I'm painting a very basic, simple brush to something that can sometimes be quite complicated. Okay, so that's all I want to say about story, to just set things off. The rest of this will be conversation. You are welcome to raise your hand or put a question in the chat. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm not going to see that because I can't look at so many different places at once. So, but if you're here on Zoom and you have a question, or you want to put something in the chat, I'll take the time to answer it. Or if you're confused and go, why are you asking her that? But happy to answer that as we go. Kathy, hello, welcome. You tried to volunteer last time when it was it did not work to my advantage in technology. So thank you for hanging on and coming back. So I'm going to start with you and say, what was your moment? What happened?
First of all, Kelly, thank you so much for doing this, and anything involving you, I love to be a part of because you're so awesome. You're so much fun.
Well, save that opinion for an hour, because I've not tried doing it like this. But thank you. I really appreciate it. And
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
only as good as the people who come to me and what you bring to me. And that's really important for me to note, is y'all are pretty talented people who, especially you, Kathy, who have some amazing stories. So that makes my job easy. All right, let's jump in.
Okay. So when you first brought this up, the first thing that came to my mind, and I decided just to go with the first thing that came to my mind,
Right.
was about 8 years ago. It was a medical crisis in my life. So I was working in corporate America in pharmaceuticals, and out of the blue, I was covered with rashes and nobody knew what was going on. So I ultimately went to go see a nutritionist. The nutritionist put me on this elimination diet. I had so much stress going on in my life at the time. My mother was dying from cancer. My son was getting bullied at school for being gay. I was working that big pharma corporate job with like no boundaries. And I go on this diet, and I just, like, everything was like head first into it, follow it to the extremes. Within 2 months, I had lost 20 pounds on this diet, and I'm a thin person and tall, as you know. And it was very scary. People thought I was anorexic. What's wrong with you? So ultimately, the doctors decided they needed to send me to a special medical facility in Arizona. I live in Florida. My mother is dying. My son is getting bullied. He's like 12. And they tell me I have to get on an airplane and I have to go all the way west, and I have to go for 45 days. And that is, I can't think of a moment in my life where I had to be more brave and do that than anything else I've ever been through. I still revel in the fact that I actually did it.
Okay, so thank you. That's a powerful moment for sure. Whenever somebody says, is this a story? Is this a story? Is this a good story? My brain immediately goes to, not, is this a good story? It goes to, does this story do what you need it to do? And does it illustrate the point that you want to make? And is it a compelling story? But even the simplest of stories that you might think other people wouldn't find compelling, they will find compelling if you show me what this meant to you in your world and the emotions around it. We can easily make a story more compelling by showing us what it means to you. That's where we ratchet up the drama and the interest and the human connection. So, but I can tell on its face, oh yeah, there's obviously a story there. The fact that you're still, how long ago was this?
7 or 8 years ago.
7 or 8 years ago, the fact that it was a big moment in your life. So I'm going to start at the end before I start to ask you questions that your audience might want to know about this, as this, oh my gosh, tell me more. Um, After all was said and done, looking back at that experience that you went through, what did it teach you?
I mean, there's too many things to count of what it taught me. One of
Well,
the big,
now I'm going to say this only because I know you're a professional and you already may know where you want to go with this.
yes,
So,
that's
so
true.
You can think of this in relation to, let's say you speak about health and well, whatever, self-care, whatever. What
Yes.
lessons did it teach you that are related to how you
Thank
might
you.
share with why do
It,
you want to share it with an audience?
yes, it taught me about prioritizing myself. It taught me about how important it is to prioritize my nervous system. I would say those are like the two biggest things. And it taught me about my emotions. It taught me about emotions as energy, that it's not good or bad, and how can I digest the energy inside of me so that I can function, so that I can use the front of my brain and think and logic and show up in a way that is meaningful to me rather than live through my emotions and my stress.
Let me also give you some homework. If you can, you pointed out three things that you know it taught you about yourself, about your, oh, what was the right? I didn't write the word, NE, nervous system, and
Yes.
your emotions. Okay. And you reserve the right to change that when you get home. But I'm showing everybody this is the process that I would go through myself. Is I
Okay.
would, okay, these are the three things I want to tell them. And what I would do is spend some time thinking about each one. What did it teach myself? What did it teach me about the nervous system? What did it teach me about emotions? Get it down to one sentence where you can go back and even word it as, if I were going to, as this is what I would teach myself. You need to blank, honor your emotions, whatever, blah, blah, blah. You need to put yourself and give it a because. You need to blank because blank. You need to take care of yourself because you can't take care of others if you're on empty. You need to pay attention to your nervous system because too often we're so focused, whatever, blah, 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 making it up. You need to honor your emotions because they exist for a reason, and da 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 da. And then once that's solid, then what I would do is now go back to the opening and create a statement. We know what's in the stories in the middle. I would create a statement that leads into this, that teases what this is all about, that tells your audience where it may be going, but doesn't give it away. So it could be a simple statement. And this, again, it depends on how you're using the story. The statement could be, when it comes to self-care, which is what I'm here to talk about, or maybe you say, when it comes to productivity, which is what I'm here to talk about, we often think the answer that it's in having the right systems and processes, or it's an outside job, whatever. I'm making something up. When
Yeah.
self-care is your secret to high performance. I learned that the hard way. Let me take you back to a moment 7 years ago. Okay. Now I'm going to, as your audience, tell you some things I'd love to know, and then also give you a little bit and how to structure it and put it together. First, for the structure, you could, in the middle of that lesson at the end and that opening statement in the beginning, give it to me in 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph, set it up and build to the event. This is where you're giving me context. It was 7 years ago. It was, and we're going to go back to each one. I'm going to tell you some more things I'd like to know as your listener. But where
Okay.
you set it up, this is the before. Middle, boom, I have a rash. We don't know what it is. It was diagnosed. The real, you had a compounding conflict, in that this happened, but but an extra conflict of, and now they want me to leave my life for 28 days when all this is going on around me. Okay. And that's your conflict. And then, and we want to, resolve it in a way there too, is we want to take it all the way. I don't want to, if it was a Lifetime movie, I would not want to have stopped there. I want to hear, I want it to go all the way through to, it got fixed. This, and here's me better. And now here's me 2 years better. Do you see what I'm saying? I want to follow the arc of the story like it's a Lifetime movie. I want to go to your happy ever after, not just stop and quickly jump to a lesson. And I want you to realize the lesson in the story before you tell me the lesson in the story. So I want you to stand in it and take me to the moment where you made that decision to choose you. Take me to the moment where you understood about your nervous system. Take me to the moment where you learned about emotions, because that's why we started with the end, because we now know the story needs to illustrate the point you're ending with. You will be able to play this. I haven't, you can go watch the replay. And I think I'm even doing a summary through AI.
Yeah.
How cool is that?
Yes.
Because that's a lot to go back and listen to and unpack. Let me just, before we move on to another volunteer, give you some things that, as your audience member, I would love to hear that
Okay.
make it even more interesting, more dramatic, and make you even more human to us. In your before, and let's look at it as before the event, and after the event, kind of those 3 paragraphs, if you will, but take that with a grain of salt. Before, I want to know, paint the picture of what your life was like before. I want to know a little bit more. You're selling pharmaceuticals. What does that life look like? Is it busy? It's fast paced. I think what you're doing is you're building up to all these things are going on, and now you get a rash and you don't have time for this. So in your before, you're kind of setting all of that up, and that's where you do a good job of that already. I would love a little bit of emotion in that before, a little bit of that, just for drama's sake. I am barely holding it together. My son's being bullied. I worry about that at night. I'm selling pharmaceutical, give me a
Yes.
little of the, don't just tell me the facts, but take me to that moment, however that may look or however that may feel, so I can really feel like I'm in this movie. And then, boom, one day out of nowhere, and I would milk it a little bit, I see a couple of dots on my arm. And in an hour, they're a cluster. And that build up the drama of this rash is appearing. Oh my goodness, I don't have time. Oh, it's nothing. It's probably nothing. I don't even have time to make an appointment, da 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 da. All, and then I make an appointment, and and you do a good job when you're telling me we don't need a lot of those details. We're just ratcheting up the drama a little bit. And then you could even say, out of everything I have to do, within 2 days, I'm sitting in front of a specialist who's saying the only solution is 28 days off the grid. See, we might not even need to know all the little pieces in between. It could be because the crux of the story is really that you had to go step out of your life at the worst time possible for 28 days to take care of yourself. I don't have time for this, which is kind of what the core of your message is. If you would, I wouldn't have built that up if that hadn't been where I knew you were going. So I would really build it all. That's kind of the core of the story, was I did not have time to deal with this last, and you could give an example or an analogy, the last straw that breaks the camel's back, whatever analogy you want to use, that last rock that or Jenga piece you pull out and everything falls down. And then as your audience, I want to just know a little bit of what it's going to feel like to disengage. How am I going to do this? Who's going to cook dinner? You kind of going through all this. And then you get there, and here's where I want more. I don't need to know everything you went through. And you're not going to have time to tell me all that. But if you're sitting with a glass of wine and we're sitting on a sofa and you've only got a couple of minutes, you naturally will know, girl, that was the toughest 28 days of my life, but it was the most, I couldn't talk to anybody. I couldn't plan. It drove me crazy. They didn't even let me open my calendar. They put me through a series of blank. They took all these things out of my diet, blank, boom, 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 boom. And finally, I hit to a point where one of the therapists said, or somebody said, stop. You need, or you had a moment there. Take me to that moment. Okay, maybe it was several. Don't give me several, just give me one for the sake of, kind of meld it all in together, where suddenly it hit me on day 27 or whatever. Oh, there's where you learn your lessons about yourself, and that's where you realize them and you learn them. And I came back to my family, who didn't even know I was gone. No, that's a joke. You could say, no, they knew I was gone. And I was a better mother. I was a stronger employee. I was a better wife. Talk about how now you were stronger, and why that was good. Maybe there was an example of why you learned the lesson, that taking time out, and learn it for me. I took time out of my life to do this, to take care of me, and it made all the difference. and I was able to have all the problems were still there. The world didn't fall apart without me. I was actually able to handle them better. And so for you, it's not a rash, but you're standing in front of something. There is some sign, symbol, warning in your life. A check engine light may be going off, and you may be saying, I don't have time. He needs me right now. This job is too important, whatever. But and maybe you need to hear the words whispered in your ear that were whispered into my mind, into mine. Take care of you first. Taking care of yourself is the greatest gift you can give to your children, to your job, and to yourself. Whatever. Take it from
Yes.
me. That little rash could be telling you something. Bam. And you can do all of that easily in a 10 minutes, maybe even with all the points we're adding, I would say getting up to 10 is not a big deal. But if you just purely told the story, you probably could do it in 5.
Sounds great.
Take a breath. Yeah, that's a lot to unpack. And I won't reiterate everything because now I want to talk about somebody else's moment. And everybody here can go watch the recording. They can go apply what I just told her to whatever your moment was. So, Kathy, if you have follow-up questions, keep them in case nobody wants to volunteer.
Okay.
Case. Okay, good. Alex is driving. Okay, Alex, keep driving, or you're going to have another brave moment we're not going to want you to face. So, I'm glad you have something to listen to. And awesome framing. Wonderful. And what I just did with Kathy is exactly what I do when a moment happens in my life. Carl, you got your hand up, and Erica has her hand up. We're going to go Carl, Erica, Carol, and then Jennifer. And I'll go a little bit faster. Carl, you ready?
Yeah, Kelly, I'm ready.
Thanks. Hey.
Hey, everybody. Thanks very much, Kelly. Yeah, I love the kind of getting structure and getting practice and telling a story. So thank you so much for your little workshop today.
Welcome.
So, my son had a lot of I've already typed some notes. My son had a lot of conflict growing up. He did some questionable things. He had some risky friends. His name is Hudson. He told me of a friend he had who was a wild driver, and occasionally he used to drive with this wild friend. And with this wild driving friend, and it was dangerous. So my son, he was a teenager, like 17 or 18 when he had this friend. The friend drove fast, didn't pay attention, almost wrecked with him in the car. And this friend of his named Chris, he had already totaled several vehicles. Well, Hudson made a decision not to drive with him. It was one of the best decisions he made. But he did have a lot of conflict in the home front. He was living full time, or he was living primarily with his mother. And then he became an adult. He wasn't really launching a career. He wasn't really moving forward with things. And at 21 years old, he got into a big verbal altercation with his mother. She kicked him out. So for a while, he interacted with us after he was kicked out. But then on one particular time, he had a phone call and got real upset with his mom. And then as a result of that phone call, and of course, he was very angry that he got kicked out, super, very angry. He decided to block us. He blocked all of us. He blocked his mom. He blocked me. He even blocked his brother. And then one day while I was having dinner, he called me. This is like a year after he had blocked me. He called me up. I was having dinner. Now, I used to call him, go right to voicemail. I could never get through to him, right? So, he had everything blocked. But while I was sitting there having dinner, he called me. I was in Colorado. He was crying. He was bawling. Now, my son is real aloof, okay? Above it all, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's very intelligent. Didn't do too well in the school, but he's very, very intelligent. He called me crying. His friend Chris, whom he stopped driving with, had run off a bridge in a car and smashed into trees, and he was just obliterated, killed instantly. My son was at the funeral when he called me. He said to me, over and over again, he said to me how much he loves me. So that's, so that's basically it. And since we've been connected, he has a booming business. He's 23 years old. He makes into six figures. He's self-employed. He's very independent. He's always been very capable, very skilled. But that's the thing I want to make a story around. Tell me your thoughts, please.
Yes, and it's very powerful. And a story about your relationship with your child. To you, it may seem so simple, but it's so universal, and we can all connect, even if we don't have children. We were a child, or we have relationships in our own life, and it's a very powerful story. I want to unpack it a little bit. There are things structurally we could do to, as I refer to it, tighten it. You could, in fewer words, set up who your son is. Smart, wicked smart. He was the kid who would laugh at any joke. He was the kid who. He was aloof, so he was the kid who, and you would fill in that. And he was the kid who, like maybe many of yours or you yourself, made some poor decisions. You could tell me all that in a few sentences, and it will be just as powerful. So that's one thing I want to suggest, but I want to go to the end, like I did with Kathy. I want to look at this and say, why is this story powerful? What is its lesson? What is life teaching us in this moment? There are other questions I have as your listener that I want to know about this story, and as a parent, but I want to go right to, what did you learn from it? What is the point that you're going to now take and tell this story to someone else so they don't have to go through what you went through? Maybe is it what, let's look, and there are quite a few roads. There's no right or wrong. So it's yours. Is it a message about understanding our children? Is it a message about being there for them? Is it a message, what is it that you think can be learned from this as a parent yourself?
Well, I think that people put up walls and they act stronger than, but people who act strong and basically resist or repel others often have a pain, and often have a lot of pain in their life.
So perhaps could you say that, and it can't be my message, it's yours, so I'm not going to give you what's not your message, and as a speaker you know what your messaging is, but perhaps is what you're trying to say is, don't write a story about someone. Hang on, because there's another part of that story you don't see. Is that how you feel? That's what I'm hearing you say. It's a very good lesson in life. Would you say you experienced that with your son? Are you saying, because I held on, because I held on and waited despite him shutting? What did you do right? Give me some more lessons and all that. I think there might be some others.
I always said to him, I said to him, his whole life, he was very independent. Yeah. And I said to him, his whole life, we have to maintain a connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever he thinks, whatever he thinks, however independent he is, we should always maintain a connection.
And that's a beautiful thing too, as well, is the connection that is necessary to keep a connection open. And how do you do that? You constantly show up. You listen even when they've shut you out. You could have some advice or things you did, but okay, I'm kind of getting to the lesson there. I want to ask you something. Are you and your son in a good place right now?
We're in a better place. He's still super independent, and he doesn't respond to me very quickly ever, very often.
Because I can feel the pain. And so we might need to let people know so we understand why because you would think you had a breakthrough, so where I think you're coming to us is as a parent who's been shut out from his son, and how painful that is, how hard it is. You had a moment, and you're still shut out. We're not telling the story. I'm just getting the plot. You're still shut out, but you had a moment there of connection. There's hope, there's light, and so maybe your story is used to help others who are in difficult relationships, to just say, keep showing up.
Sometimes the people that need you the most won't reach out.
Yeah. Okay. That might be the biggest lesson of all, is that sometimes the people that need you the most will never be the ones who will tell you. That's very powerful. The people that almost could be your where you go with all this. My message to you today is that often the people who need you the most will be the last ones who are going to ask. And so keep showing up, no matter how long you've been blocked, keep the line of connection open. When you get it, maybe you have some, when you get it, just listen. Just listen. I mean, the fact that he reached out to you was a positive sign that you must have done something that showed you were always open to that. And you could even at the end of your story say, he still shut us out. We still most days don't know where he is. Now, when you say my brain doesn't know whether he's just a kid who doesn't want to have anything to do with his parents anymore, or whether he's living on the streets, and you really don't know about his safety. And the nosy part of me kind of wants to know, what are we talking about here? And you don't have to give details. I get it that you want to honor your child. But it comes in your emotions. You say, he shut us all out. We don't know where he is. We don't know. I mean, maybe it's you worried for his safety, or maybe it's, he's got a child and we haven't even met them. Whatever that looks like, you can pull that out. And there's where, when we go back to the structure of the story, you set it up with this illustration of, this is was our son. Just like I said, he's smart. He was funny. He was the kid with good grades. And then you go to a couple of the darker side. He was aloof. He was, he didn't always make good decisions. And maybe say something redeeming like, now you couldn't say that about your son per se, but wasn't comfortable in something that's redeeming, but kind of explains he just never knew how to function in the world he was in. Or he was something, about how he has a hard time
he has a hard time expressing himself.
Yes, expressing himself. And that can often lead to, whatever. Now, the driver and the friend in the car, I'm having a little bit of a hard time connecting the dots. Like, why does that matter to this story? It feels like they're two separate stories. So I would say they're very powerful things that happen in his life. So I would say we need to connect the dots on this one. There's a reason you're including it as part of this. So we need to make it make sense.
Well, that's the reason he reached out to me, was because he was at the funeral and he realized his father was just destroyed.
Oh, I need to hear that. That's a beautiful part of the story I need to hear, is that
that's why he called me. His father was destroyed.
Yeah.
He was at the funeral and he saw not just his father, his mother, this kid was 21 years old.
Right. And so what your son realized in that moment, I want to hear in that story. I want him to say, either him to say, Dad, my friend died. Remember the kid that you would never let me drive? And now backing up, I would make that part of the story shorter. I would say he was this, he was that, he was that, it's a side note in the story. So I would say, I remember he didn't make good choices. One time he did make a good choice, though. He stopped riding with, Ernie Faulkner, the kid who was, whatever. And then you could just mention that and move on. And
this kid he stopped driving with was the kid that
I know
was killed in the car wreck. Okay.
Which is why I don't want you to take it out but I think you can make it a little bit shorter and then reference it. Remember that kid, Ernie Faulkner, whatever. But when he shuts you out, I want a little bit more there. And you may not be ready to tell all of it. You can't tell a story till you're through bleeding from it. But you don't have to be all the way on the other end of it either. So it's okay to get teared up. It's okay to get emotional. If you tell a story well and inside it, you're going to get emotional. That's not what I'm saying.
This
But
was 2 months ago.
yeah,
when he
so it
called me.
might, yeah, and that's beautiful. And I love emotion in a story. And I want to hear what it's like to one day your kid never wants to call you again. I want you to take another moment and say, can you imagine what that must feel like? One day, what Christmas, and we get no call. I mean, take us into the moment. Don't factually tell us, go in there, which is going to make it worse on you. That's why I'm saying you got to decide when it's really you're okay to, or how much of it you're to tell. But you don't want to be so safe that it's too factual and you're too removed. And then you can say, and then one day he just never called again. And then it was 2 months, and then it was 6 months, and then it was a year. And if you've ever waited one night out of worry for your child and where they are and why haven't they called, then you probably can imagine multiplying that times 100, times 200, times, right. And the desperation and the despair at having a child and not knowing where he is gutted us, completely gutted us. But and then maybe we don't even need to know what you did as a parent. And then 2 months ago, out of the blue, I pick up my phone. Maybe you're in the middle of something. Where are you? Are you in bed? Give us some context.
Dinner. Yeah, I'm at dinner.
I'm eating dinner. I pick up my phone and it says, and what his name is, Hudson. Hey, son, what's up? And, you might want to act it out a little bit. I want you to do what's natural for you. And he's sobbing. And in broken words, he tells me, Dad, you remember Ernie? He died. Dad, he died. He went over the cliff. He died. Is everybody okay? Yeah. And you want this, either he tells you or you turn to the audience. Are you okay, son? Yeah, I'm okay, Dad. It takes some thinking in terms of how to write it down, but I'm not even going to go there in this moment because I want to be faster. But you're going to kind of tell me about that moment, and then you turn to the audience and say,
"Can I ask?" Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you could say something to the audience and say, "You see, he had gone to the funeral." You could hang up and say, "Okay, I'm here, son. Call me if you need me. I'm right here." And hung up. And I didn't know if he was going to call again, but I was so happy to have gotten that moment. You see, whoa, somebody's making, anyway, you could say, turn to the audience. You could say, see, in that moment, he had looked around at the funeral and he had seen the family and realized what he had lost with his. And he felt that desire. And my son, against every, way, whatever, reached out. And here's my point. Why am I I don't know when he's going to call again. I'm hoping it's sooner rather than later. Why am I telling you this? Because I want to remind you that sometimes the people who need your help the most are the last ones who are going to reach out, but still keep showing up, still keep reaching out. Just trust that, and you could say something about the kid doesn't hate you, trust that there can still be a relationship. You just need a simple connection. That's kind of what I would do with it. And it's a very powerful story, and it's not a story that's over yet.
Yeah.
But you keep showing up. And I think that's the important thing, is you keep showing up. And the important thing to know is that he needed you. He needed his dad. He just didn't know how to ask. And have faith, because those difficult people don't write a story that says they don't care. It may just be that they're afraid to ask, or so. And there might be something else, piece of advice you could give them, because there's still a piece of me that says, what do we do with that? So what do I do with that? How do I get through each day? But that's what life is. Okay. That's all I got.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck, Carl. He's going to call again. I know it. And he knows you're there, and he knows you love him. And
Mhm.
at the end of the day, we know when people love us, even though we may not be good at letting you know we know that. And that's all you can hope for. All right, who is next?
I think I was.
Okay. Hello, Erica.
How
doing?
are you? It's so good to see you. I'm so excited for today. So great to see all you. So I'm just gonna read what I have already, if
Yeah.
that's okay, and it leads into the story. So
Yeah, sure.
okay, do you ever dare to be more resilient? But what have you ever wanted to be stronger, wanted to be braver, perhaps bolder, dared to overcome challenges more easily? Looked at your company and wanted to create a more resilient team? Good. Me too. And that's exactly why we are here today, to learn to overcome adversity, to learn how to sharpen our pencils, to become more audacious with this during this ride called life. I learned this lesson many times in my own life, and today I'm here to share it with you. You see, I never knew that punch to my face would teach me such a lesson. That punch taught me more than I would have ever known. A day that forever changed my life. I always said, it could never happen to me. But you see, it did. It was a Thursday, June 16th of 2022, a warm, overcast summer day. I'm rushing, coffee flying, my favorite hot blazer on. My husband was away for work in Kansas City, and my kids had a new babysitter. I gave them that extra love, but my mind was racing a million miles an hour. I was a hot mess express, and thank God I had the same two shoes on and no stains on my shirt just yet. I drove to work the exact same way I always did. I was just minutes from work. But on that morning, I had a networking meeting and it delayed me. I quickly drove to the employer that I had worked for 10 years. I parked in the exact same parking spot. I took that last sip of cold lemon water. I opened that door. But before I could even step out of my car, he was standing inches from me. A 210-pound man who I had never seen before. Sir, can I help you? But the words didn't even slip out of my mouth. He punched me straight in the face. He pulled me out by the long tendrils of my hair, and he threw me intensely to that asphalt pavement. He strangled me, and I blacked out. By the act of someone very much higher than me, I was able to get to my feet and run for help. See, this man has forever changed my life. And looking back, I'll always wonder if that networking meeting hadn't occurred, if my husband hadn't been away, if I didn't have to be in the office that morning, would my life had turned out differently? I'll never know. And to be honest, it really doesn't matter. See, we all have our own punches. They come when we least expect them. Life has a crazy way of pushing them down. And at times it's easier to play that victim. Life can derail us and take us by surprise. But you see, there's always a silver lining to these stories. Within 72 hours of that incident, I had consciously made the audacious decision not to allow that punch to define me, but rather redefine me. See, it's the actions we take and the way that we respond that makes all the difference in the world. Your punch could be anything in your life right now. The divorce papers, perhaps, that you just filled out this month. That unfulfilled, dreaded career that makes you lie awake countless nights after night. Your sick child dealing with the debilitating consequences. That death of a loved one who you just buried last week. Or perhaps that inner battle that you're sitting with today in that dark space. So I remind you today that we are all here, all sitting here right now, or will be in the future. And this is the reality of life.
Breathe. That's powerful. I'm sorry that happened to you. That's frightening. That's frightening. It's never happened to me, but for people I know that it's happened to, one lady recently just in the park and gets in her car and two guys with guns, out of nowhere. People don't realize how it traumatizes your life forever. And so to explain that a little bit might also be helpful, is that for those of us who haven't been through that have you ever been through a moment that, it traumatizes you? What does it make you feel or think or go through? But I'm sorry that happened to you. Your message is beautiful. You're so well written, so well said, so confident, so beautiful. It really proves to me that our moments are given to us to become our testimony, or whatever you want to call it, as a gift you find in it and can use for someone else. And I love how you related it to the punches, that your next punch is coming. What I would love to add is just some spice, a few tiny little things. And I hope I'm going to be able to explain it well. Structure, everything, wonderful. The build up, man, all of it's great. All of it. I didn't see it coming. Delivery can be a conversation for another day. I wasn't judging it based on delivery, but a good story is half script and half how you deliver it. So there are going to be ways where, whatever, but we're not talking delivery today, and you were just reading it. So we're not at that point where I might have had stuff to say. Okay. I want to see what the man looked like. I can't see him in my head. You said 220 or whatever, 210. I need to see him. Did he have a smell? Did he have a beard? Did he have what? I know there are things you're not going to forget. The metal of the gun. Oh, I don't remember if you said he had a gun, but what the tennis shoe, there's just a few things that are burned and seared into your image. I need to see them. Now, I also think earlier when you kissed your kids goodbye, oh, they got a babysitter, I'm so excited, whatever. Maybe humanize the kids a little bit, or just one of them. And there's a reason why, because I'm going to have a suggestion for later. But, Betsy and her cute little curls asking me, could she have a popsicle? Whatever. Not all of them, but maybe just one moment with one might work to what, not necessary, only as applied to the suggestion I'm going to give in a minute. When he punched you, I need a little bit of that. It felt like when you're watching a Lifetime movie and the woman gets punched and now she's victorious in front of us. We missed a piece in the middle.
Yeah.
I know you chose it 72 hours, but I need to see a little bit of the broken woman that came before the 72 hours.
Okay.
Almost like, now maybe you immediately were fine, but I need to see that. I called my husband. I was a mess. I need to see that image a little bit, of this happens and the emotion attached to it. Because this is what we connect on emotion. We got to go to that moment and feel there's the punch. I blacked out. I woke up. Where did you wake up? Did you have to go to the hospital? Maybe the moment of at the kitchen and your kids are crying, your husband's angry, and let's find him, whatever. Take me to a scene like that.
Yep.
Take me to a scene of rock bottom or just,
yeah.
And
Kelly, I actually have a part in there where I say, he punched me 4, 5,
yes.
6 more times. But at that point, I was barely even counting as the saliva, the blood, the tears rubbed down my face. Like I actually had that in there.
Of that. And that's that scene. And in the scene after, and maybe not the first 2 hours necessarily, but I need a scene after of mom's a mess. This just happened. Our family, my mother, whatever happened in that family. What I want to see is you having to get back up again. Okay. Instead of going straight to, I got back up. So I want you to, I said it to somebody else on the call, have the realization, learn the lesson, be knocked down, be afraid, be scared. I bet you couldn't even sleep at night. I bet you were scared a lot. We need to move. What am I going to do? This is going to be with and you could tell the audience in that moment, my life was forever changed. I will never be able to completely remove him from the memory. But the next morning when I was pouring Cheerios for my daughter, whatever, I'd love for you to go to a moment where you make that decision to have a different choice. Now I
know exactly where it was. Yeah.
Well, this is where I was hoping that the child could come back into it, because you could, looking in her eyes, realize that the choice you make here isn't just for you, that she's watching you. And and I'm going to show her whatever. And okay, what was the moment? You said you already know. I probably don't even need to make one up.
Yeah, I say, 72 hours later, I'm sitting in my gazebo where I always felt so safe and felt
Yeah.
so, watching my kids play in the pool.
Right.
And
Oh,
at that moment, I realized I had to do it for them.
yes. Okay. Bingo, bingo, bingo. I wanted to see, like in a Lifetime movie, that moment where she decides she's not going to put up with it anymore. So show me that moment. And there's no right or wrong. It's just that it's you coming to the realization of choosing why you're going to do this. And it's important because I'm now listening to you facing my own thing. And I don't want you to tell me to get over it. I want to see you get over it, understand why. In that moment, I realized that life comes down to a choice where we cannot control all these things, but we get to make a decision in what we are going to do right now. And I realized that my daughter, watching my kid, whatever you realized, realize it. And then you turn to your audience and say, for you, it will be, you said that beautifully, whatever your punch is, whatever. And I hope you hear the words, that I did. And then you repeat, every moment comes down to a choice. Mm-hmm. Will we let the punches own us, or will we, what is that thing we can tell ourselves? What's the thing Carl can tell himself every day? I can still believe that there's good in the world and that the best is yet to come. I still believe, because what you're doing is using that story to talk to somebody that's in the punch. And so it kind of becomes, I'm going to do this because I believe that, I cannot carry this around with me, whatever that is. And neither should you. I mean, you said it in a beautiful way. Those are just, yeah, that's it.
Thank you.
I love it. Very good. Very good. Very brave. Very brave. And sometimes bravery isn't about making the right choice. How did you start your story? I would go back and think about how you started your story, and then do you want to come back to how you started it?
Well, I said, I never knew that punch to the face would teach me such a lesson.
Yeah, well, I might go back then, and when you said, do you want resilience I could say all that, but you could say, when it comes to resiliency, it's really about dealing with the punches that life throws at you and come out of nowhere. Disruption. That it hits us at work and it hits us in life. And I know that feeling very well. Making what sounded real good and fancy at the beginning and leave it. You're adding a more guttural, disruption at work are these punches that just come out of nowhere.
I like that.
All right. Thank you,
Kelly.
Playing. I hope y'all are all watching, finding this helpful too, especially if you don't get a turn. Now I'm going to do one more person. And if you find it helpful, we'll do them again, and other people can get a turn. Again, I'm not used to really doing this because I never know what are you going to show up with, and will I be able to help? So who was? I see all these hands up now. Who did I say was next?
You had me after Erica.
Okay, so you're next, and maybe I only named one more person, Lynn. Lynn, if you hang on, I'll do you, whether anybody, even if they all have to drop off, I'll do both of y'all before we hang up. So apologies for anybody watching that we're going over an hour, but you'll be fine. Cut it off if you got to go. All right. What you got, Carol? What happened for you?
Well, let me just say first, thank you so much. And I met you at an NSADC meeting when you spoke with us, and we have been buzzing about you since. So you make a long-term impact, Kelly. So know that.
Well, yay. Thank you.
I'm going to just jump in. I feel like I must have read that article 100 times. The history girls, the women who were making history important and interesting and relevant today. And more than anything, I wanted to meet them. and then I might have a chance. I noticed one of the history girls, my very favorite, was doing a trip, but it was in England and I'm in the US, and it was expensive, and it would take time off work and away and all those things. But the real problem was, who am I to go on a trip with the history girls? I love history. I study history. I like to talk about history, but I am not a PhD. I do not know this stuff. Who am I to do that? With some encouragement from my daughter, who found me a cheaper flight to London that I knew existed, I signed up. I was going to go on a trip with one of the history girls. And then, after a typical mammogram exhibit,
Oh,
a typical mammogram visit, I got the call back. Come back. We need to do this again. We saw something funny. Sitting in the office, waiting. Carol Ann, we'll have you do a sonogram as well. We're just not quite sure. By this point, I knew something was wrong. And that vision of the history girls trip began to fade. Lying on the table in the tech's office and hearing him say, "Whoa, look at this one. It has its own blood supply." I knew I was in trouble. Yep. 3 spots, all malignant. The story was changing. There was a part of me who wanted to just skip it, just put it off, just wait until after my trip. There was also a part of me that thought maybe I wasn't meant to go on a trip with a history girl, just give it up. But instead, I took a deep breath and said to my surgeon, "Here's the thing. I have this trip and I really want to do it." In the back of my mind, though, as he was going over treatment options and what I had to face, that question came back. Who am I to beat breast cancer? I knew friends who had, and I knew friends who hadn't. And I know sometimes it doesn't matter. It's not all up to you. There are ways and means of trying that don't always work. But the real problem I faced was that question, who am I? Fortunately, thanks to a surgeon who I believe was God's gift, practically an angel on earth, who said to me, "Let's keep that trip as an option. Let's keep you focused on that and figure out how to get you there." I embarked on that journey of surgeries and treatments with hope in my heart that I was someone who could try, who could fight, who could overcome not feeling up to my best self, but maybe still get on a plane and go to England. That I was somebody, even though I don't have a PhD, who could keep up with people on that trip, who could meet a history girl and hold my own. Who am I? I am someone willing to try. I did my treatments, I went on the trip, and now I look back and I am grateful for both the trip and the cancer experience, and for what those 2 things taught me about what I'm capable of.
wow. Hello. Standing ovation. Clap, clap, clap. That was beautiful. And you're okay, right?
Yes, all good now.
I want to know that. I want to know that, so I don't have to worry. Wow, that's a beautiful story. Very well told. The history girls. There was a piece, maybe tiny line. This is a nuance of what it means to you to be part of that history. I would love to hear just a little bit about your passion for that. And you're very well spoken and succinct. So I know you can do it in a way that doesn't add a lot of words, but just adds a line of, "I'm going to be part of history." There's something there that could explore this theme of being part of history. I love it all. And in fact, all I have is a tiny thread that might be interesting to weave through it. When you said at some point, and I love how you're doing, it's all about, who am I to do this? Who am I to go? Whatever. Who am I to beat cancer? I love that. Now, I would love it if early on you set up this idea life must be sending me a message. You said it a little bit later, and I glommed onto it. But what if it's life must be telling me, life must be sending me a message. You don't get to go on that trip. Oh, turns out there was a ticket. And don't mention life sending you a message, but just have that in our backpack. You could go. Then when it comes to the cancer, life was sending me a message. This trip is not for you. And then who am I to beat cancer? Life was sending me a message once again that I'm not strong enough. See where I'm going right here? Because, and then the doctor, who I would love it for the doctor, and we can lie a little bit if you're okay with that, where the doctor says, he says, focus on the trip, but I'm trying to give the role to the doctor to where you go, well, I guess life's telling me I'm not going on that trip. And the doctors said, well, then maybe it's time you change that message.
Oh, okay.
Let's focus on the trip. Now you could have that thought yourself, but it's kind of cool if you're like, well, I get, or maybe the nurse, and they said, let's focus on where you want to go, not where you don't, and then so you finish the story, and then your message at the end becomes, I think the point of what I'm telling you, and come back to the history. Now I'm part of history, or my history is still in the making. There's something about history that's still cool. But I think you could also say, my final words to you or message is, life will constantly send you messages. The question you need to know when it's time for you to change them.
Oh, that's great.
That is great. That would be, and then boom, all of it, everything else is perfect. Well, it would have been perfect without it, but wouldn't that be cool? It's that.
Oh, I love that.
Here's,
I love that. And at the end, I now have a history podcast, and I interviewed that person I went on the trip with. She's been a guest on my podcast, and I've been a guest on hers.
And history is about people who changed the story.
Oh,
they changed their story. It's this concept too of life sends you a message, but you don't have to take it.
Okay, love that.
I love it a lot. You might change it, which is, it's a common theme. That's why I say I always think about where this ends up is what is that? You told me what is it you want them to know? And there it is right there. Yay.
Yeah,
awesome.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Great.
You're welcome, Glenn. I'm happy to stick around if you've got time. You're muted.
Hey, Kelly.
Hey, you want to take a turn?
I do. Thank you so much.
Take a turn? That sounds bad.
I want to take a turn. Thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for doing this. It was 2 weeks before Christmas in 1986, and I was a fairly new mom. My husband traveled quite a bit, and it was a normal day. I was there by myself, and I was getting ready to go to work. I had just gotten out of the shower. My baby was still asleep, and a knock came at the door. I went to the door, and my sister-in-law happened to be there, which was really weird because it was 6:15 in the morning. And I said, well, what are you doing? And she said, well, I have to tell you, Cliff has had a major heart attack, and he's about 2 hours away from us. Now, my husband was only 34 years old at the time.
Wait, stop. I got to stop you. Is Cliff her husband or yours?
My husband, her brother.
All right.
I'm sorry. My husband, Cliff, her brother, had a heart attack. He had a major heart attack, and he was on the road. Well, the wind was knocked out of me. That was the last thing I had ever expected. So we talked for a minute and sort of got a game plan together. I got my son up and got him dressed. And so we hadn't told my mother-in-law. So fortunately, she lived nearby, and she was willing to keep my son that day. So we stopped, and of course, having to deliver the news to her, which is always it's hard enough to absorb news yourself, but then trying to tell a mother that her son has had a major heart attack, it was even more difficult. So we traveled to the hospital where he was. And of course, back then, this was 1986, there weren't any cell phones, and it was a lot different time in terms of communication. So we walked in, and my husband was still, he was in intensive care. And we walked in, and there was a woman in there that I didn't really know. And then my brother-in-law happened to be there. I really wasn't paying a lot of attention. I was more concerned about my husband. So I went in, and of course I was really upset and was just like, "Oh, are you okay? Are you okay?" And the doctor had said to him that a heart attack had damaged the bottom portion of his heart. And so he was in a fairly small rural hospital. And my sister-in-law had said, "I think we need to move him to somewhere that's a bit more advanced and a bit." And so finally he agreed to do that. Well, the next day I showed up, and there was some mysterious flowers there with no card on them. I said, "Well, where did that come from?" "Oh, well, just some people I work with." And as we got ready to move him, he said, I said, "Well, where's your wallet? Where's your personal stuff?" And he said, "Well, don't worry about it." I said, "No, they're going to move you in an ambulance. Just let me take your wallet, put it in my purse. Everything's fine." Well, there were too many question marks. There were way too many question marks about this. I'm distraught about him having had a heart attack. I was out of work, 2 weeks before Christmas. I worked at a community college that was closed for 2 weeks. So I got a week ahead, and all the people who worked with me, all they knew was my husband had had a heart attack. So we got him moved, and something told me, and I shouldn't have, but I did. I looked in his wallet, and there was a letter in there from a woman who described sitting across the table, and there was an old Randy Travis song called "On the Other Hand," and she had paraphrased it, and she was talking about the fact that he knew he was married. Well, long story short, he had had the heart attack with her. He had had a girlfriend, and he had had a long-term relationship. I never saw it coming. I never saw it coming. I never saw anything. I was busy being a new mom. I was busy trying to take care of a family, trying to work, and just trying to keep the top of my head on, really, is where it was. So I called him. He was in intensive care. And I said, "Who's Sylvia?" He said, "What are you doing looking in my wallet?" I said, "Well, sorry about that, but I needed to know. I needed to know." So that moment was when things in my whole life, that one day, my whole life turned upside down. My husband made a decision that changed the whole trajectory of what I had planned out in my life. I wanted to be a mom, a wife, um, and he had turned that upside down. So I was left. He came home on Christmas Eve, my son's very first Christmas. Came home from the hospital. We went through Christmas, and the day after Christmas, he left, and that was the end of our marriage. That was the end of our marriage. I was left as a single mom. Never knew, never in a million years thought that that was going to be my fate. But as time went on, and I was lost. I was as lost as anybody could be. I just didn't know where to turn, what to do. People would say, "Are you going to go home and live with your dad?" And I was like, "Well, no, I'm 28 years old. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make it." So finally, there was a moment, there was an epiphany that came to me that said, and I had a conversation with God, and I said, "You know what? If you let me live long enough to raise this child by myself, I will do the very best job that I can." And that's exactly what happened. So that's my story.
Wow, wow. You're such a good storyteller, Lynn. You really are. I mean, your voice is like butter. I was just following you and feeling your pain. And okay, where I want to go is to the end, which is what I always do. And I want you, maybe not on this call, but I want you to craft another phrase.
Mhm.
So, my message to you, the woman who's now sitting where I was all those years ago, to the man who's just lost his job,
Mhm.
to the woman who's to the teenager who think, whatever, da 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 da. Here's my message to you. And I want you to really think about what that message is you want to give to them, as if they are back where you were, because it's a powerful story. You did it. And I want to know what would, maybe it's a matter of, maybe you would say, if I could go back to that young woman, I
Mhm.
would tell her blank, blank, and blank, whatever that is. And then you could say, and so I stand in front of you today, facing whatever challenges in your life, and whispering to you those same truths, blank, blank, and blank. Now, get that down there to give it some structure. And then I would want something in the opening based on what you speak about or why you're there, whatever, to hint at that, what I call a lead-in statement. You know, you could say, sometimes it's not the decisions that you make in life that make you strong, but what you believe about yourself.
Mhm.
You know, something
Absolutely.
like that to
Mhm.
throw at the end. You could say, I learned that the hard way. Okay. And you
Mhm.
told the story beautifully when you said you had the win. I mean, you did it so conversationally, so authentically, but, and yet with such beautiful language, the wind knocked out of me. I would love it if you look at that baby. Okay. So you've heard your husband's had a heart attack. You look at that baby and think, what do you think when you look at your baby? I remember I got really sick when my son was a baby, and I still remember looking at him as they're rushing me to the hospital, and my mother saying, wondering, am I ever going to see you again? I remember that. So there might be a thought you had as I looked at this baby and wondered, was he about to lose his father? Something like that. Add a little bit more drama. Damaged, when you said it, damaged a piece of his heart. I know it, you may not say it this way, and you don't have to, but I immediately thought, and in doing so, damaged a peace of mind.
Mhm.
Then the flowers in the wallet. When there's flowers, what did these flowers come from? Oh,
Mhm.
no, it's just from work. Where's your wallet? Oh, no, don't worry about it. And
Mhm.
I would say, I wouldn't say there were too many question marks. I'd just say a little, my gut started tickling,
Mhm.
or something bugged me about that.
Kelly, well, go. I was going
I,
to say to you, there have been times, as I mentioned to you, that I was away for work for 3 weeks, and people didn't know what happened with the girlfriend, and so I got to a point where I said I was afraid he was going to die, and came to a place where I wish he had. You know, it's
yeah,
one of the things that
yeah. I mean, it's
I can
honesty.
almost wish he had. So,
It is honesty, and it doesn't hurt to share that with us. I might, if it were me, once he's in the hospital, I might cut out some of those details. They moved him, then this, then that. You know, I would almost cut all that down to what really matters is he had a heart attack. He was going to be okay, but they were going to need, we were moving him to a rehab place. And I would almost leave it at that. And when they moved him out of the room, I grabbed his wallet and peeked
mhm.
inside. And I would say, I would even tighten what you say. And there, between his credit cards and his license, and a picture of our son, was a folded piece of paper. I didn't want to open it, but I did.
Mhm.
And it was a love letter.
Yeah.
You could almost just say that. And it was a love letter. That day, I was wrecked. By Christmas, he was gone.
Mhm.
You know, you could almost
That's good. Yeah.
just tight, short, boom, love letter. I mean, I don't even know that you even need to say who is she? You know, what are you doing reading my letter? I mean, I almost think you could just say, I read a love letter. Within 30
Mhm.
days, he was gone. He chose her, not us.
Mhm.
And my entire, and I think this is what I would add to your story too. My entire fairy tale collapsed. The entire story that I had lived for, believed in, of who I was, of who we were, of the life we were going to have, everything I had hung every belief in was gone.
Mhm.
So you could move towards a space of, I had to learn to write a new story. You know,
Mhm.
maybe some of the messaging we've heard today might work here,
Okay.
is because that is what happens. We hang on to this idea of what our life is supposed to be, and then something comes out of left field, and it isn't. And what do you do? And you could
Mhm.
say, I was gutted. I was absolutely, I did not know how to let, maybe you know the feeling when everything you thought to be true about life isn't. How do you move on from that? And I
Mhm.
remember I just got to a point where I was talking to God about it and I had a few choice words, whatever.
Mhm.
And I
Good,
said,
Kelly.
God,
Thank you.
I said,
Yeah.
God, if you'll let me help raise this child, I'll do right by you, or something like that. And
Mhm.
give me something more. And over those course of those years, God showed me that I still had a story left. Life
Mhm.
still brought happiness. It's still, I want to hear that life wasn't just miserable. I want to hear that you got on your feet, you found love again, you found whatever that a life of purpose, a life of, of whatever. So you didn't get the story you thought you would,
Mhm.
but that's okay, because, and however, I don't know how much you bring faith into it or how much you want to, whatever, but however you would say, not behind every rainbow there's rain, there's a rainbow, but kind of that same thing is
Mhm.
I learned that life sometimes will give you a do-over,
Mhm.
even more than one.
Mhm.
You're stronger than you think you are. And
That,
even
that was the biggest takeaway.
that's
Is
the
you are
big,
so much stronger than you think you
you are
are.
so much stronger than you think you are.
Mhm.
And even though you didn't get the life you wanted or you had, there is still a beautiful life left ahead. Now, I
Mhm.
tell people, because I believe it, I say, I believe that the best is yet to come. And I
Mhm.
am always going to believe that. It's going to be
Yep.
the story that I write. So anyway, that's beautiful. And how
Thank
old's your son
you.
now?
He's 38 and he has a 5-year-old son. So
See? So, I mean, take us again to back to that beautiful moment. And it wouldn't hurt if your ex-husband ended up getting a divorce, or give us a little bit of something that maybe he didn't turn, whatever.
yeah.
It'd be funny, kind of like a funny, like you could be like, I don't know, I heard, I heard they had to refund, or I heard they went bankrupt, I'm just saying, or something,
Well,
something
he
funny
did
and catty.
he married her and he divorced her and then he married somebody else
See?
and he had another child with her. He
Yeah.
divorced her
So
and
you
he
could say you,
died. He
oh,
died very suddenly at 49. So
so you could even say,
yeah.
I dodged a bullet, or look at what,
Mhm.
look at, I don't know, somehow find some good in that as
Oh,
well.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. That was
Thank
beautiful. All
you.
right.
Thank you for doing this, Kelly. Thank you. Thank
Wrap
you.
this up. Y'all let me know later if you really, well, I'll know if you ever sign up again. I'm thinking of doing more of these, giving them themes and prompts of just taking a moment and how do we build a story out
Mhm.
of it. And y'all all showed up in fine form. Thank you very much. I
Thank
appreciate it.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.